Welcome to the Daily Allegory through Astrological Divination. Before we get started today, the Dark Horse has a message for the Whispered community. Time's up. It's time to pay up and pay the piper. To the Hive Mind, in this hostile takeover, we're going to be elevating this season. We will not tolerate sabotage, and modify or die is the agenda. Evolve. Or desist to be. And a message from the crone herself. Enjoy your season of Job. May you be as graceful through it as you are relishing at people going through it. Our magic motto of the day is when the deadline of consequence is passed, every further scheme becomes an affidavit against its own maker. Today's story is about a reckless group already exposed, questioned, and with some members jailed, refusing to accept that its window for control, it's closed. And in the last wave of panic begins escalating anyways, frantically plotting in group chats about how to manipulate environmental factors, destabilize a couple, and manufacture tension between them, never realizing that those chats have long been under high-level scrutiny. Convinced that they still have time, they stalked a couple at the gym, try to provoke suspicion through vague, malicious tone comments, and even recruit old neighbors of the woman to message her with dark insinuations about her partner, only to become enraged and block her when asked for proof, while every move, message, and approach is quietly documented by detectives already watching them watch the couple. What the group does not grasp is that the entire situation is being examined at extreme scale as authorities finalize reports tying the harassment campaign to a much larger financial fraud involving stolen mail, hidden funds, and the deliberate mislabeling of a man as mentally ill and incapable of caring for himself, an illusion that left him unaware of money supposedly received on his behalf, while others profited in the shadows. Until the evidence grew too overwhelming for the network to outrun, and the arrests moved from preparation to inevitability. This is the Deadline House. By the time they understood the deadline had already passed, they were no longer planning an outcome. They were merely documenting their own collapse. It began in a language of panic disguised as strategy, a private group chat, once confident and vulgar in its certainty, and had grown thin and feverish. Some members had already been called in. Few had already seen the inside of holding cells. Others were pretending not to notice how many numbers had gone silent, how many familiar names had stopped replying, how many jokes had curdled into instructions. But still they kept typing. Still they kept asking the same doomed question in different forms. What else can we do before it closes? As if they had time. They thought they still had time. That was the first delusion. The second was a little bit more dangerous. They believed escalation could still alter reality, so they began discussing environmental factors, the phrase they used when they wanted to sound intelligent about cruelty. Temperature, timing, routine, pressure, optics, chance encounters, old acquaintances reintroduced like infected needles. Their target now was not only the man, but the couple. The idea of them. The bond itself. If they could not break him alone, they would destabilize the atmosphere around both of them until distrust became self-generating. That was the theory anyways. They wrote it down in fragments and bullet points in breathless voice notes, never knowing that the group chat had long since stopped belonging to them. High above the nervous chatter, the authorities had already turned the entire thing inside out. Every message was being watched, every deletion was preserved, every half-coded suggestion translated. Every false casualness tagged, indexed, and cross-referenced. What the group imagined was improvisation was, to the people reading it, a confession stretched over several weeks. The astrology of the season would have embarrassed them if they had been capable of embarrassment. Jupiter in Cancer swelled the house of family, home, hidden care, private records, protection, and the crimes committed around them. It expanded the domestic line until it became impossible to conceal. The North Node Mercury and Mars in Pisces made speech slippery, conspiracies fluid, deception instinctive, and panic travel faster than logic. It also ensured that what was said in secret would dissolve the edges between intention and evidence. And across from the drowning current stood a brutal wall of fire. Neptune, Saturn, Sun, Chiron, all in Aries. Illusion, consequence, identity, and wound fused into open conflict. It was the kind of sky that punishes people for believing that they can hide behind confusion forever. They did not know any of this, though. They only knew things felt wrong. The gym was their next idea. Neutral ground, public enough to feel safe, intimate enough to be useful. They would watch the couple there, they said, study body language, insert pressure carefully, maybe approach one of them, maybe say something vague, not as accusation, never something clean enough to challenge directly, but a suggestive concern. A murmur in passing, if you will, the sort of sentence that stains thought even after it's dismissed, the best lies are parasitic almost. They do not need to be believed immediately, only remembered at the right time. So they went. What they never saw were the detectives already in place, watching them, watch the couple. Watching who lingered too long near the water fountain, watching who kept checking reflections instead of mirrors, watching who drifted close enough to overhear, then farther away to type. Watching which member of the group got brave enough to approach and release a carefully poisoned phrase into the air, as if concern and malice were not visibly different things to trained eyes. Even that was seen, though. A woman from the group crossed paths with the couple near the exit and said something with just enough venom beneath the softness to qualify as concern. Another member spoke to the man with that aggressive politeness people use when they want to provoke a reaction while preserving deniability. A third tried to project confidence, because apparently attacking somebody's confidence was a go-to move. As though being near them at all was a form of dominance. But the couple did not rupture. They absorbed the encounter and moved on, like healthy adults. The group, meanwhile, returned to the chat agitated and dissatisfied, already strategizing their next contamination point. That was when they recruited old neighbors. The woman's past became another entry point. Former neighbors were contacted, prompted, encouraged to message her with insinuations about the man. Dark hints, vague enough concerns, caution without evidence. Poisoned without fingerprints. Should have worked. In the group's imagination, anyways, all history was leverage. All prior proximity could be weaponized. All the messages failed in an unexpected way, though. When asked for proof, the messengers could not produce any. One became defensive. Another became indignant. One simply blocked her. The entire exchange was preserved and passed upward like a blood sample under glass. Like Dexter. The vigilante that takes out, cancer in society. Be like a one-man show taking on an entire cult that's a problem to public safety. By then, the authorities had the situation under an electron microscope, not metaphorically, but spiritually, at a scale so fine that motive itself seemed visible. And beneath the harassment campaign, beneath the stalking, beneath the manufactured concern and social engineering, lay the older crime. The real one. The one that made all the rest look desperate instead of strategic. It was financial. Stolen mail, intercepted notices, misrouted funds, accounts and benefits handled in ways designed to keep the man uninformed, unnotified, and administratively absent from his own life. The fraud had depended on one ugly lie repeated in many respectable forms, that he was mentally unfit, incapable, unstable, unable to care for himself. A homeless junkie living in the woods, even though he's minding his own business in a 6-bedroom single-family home. That would be wild, especially coming from somebody who's getting evicted. They can't even maintain a 1-bedroom apartment. That the loving family around him constituted a safe container rather than a screen. That he was being looked after. That money allegedly connected to him could be moved without him seeing it because his confusion was natural, his silence clinical, his displacement regrettable but necessary. But the authorities had everything. The mail trails, the omissions, the timelines, the internal discussions, the mislabeling. The benefit of every doubt the group had tried to exploit had, by now, hardened into evidence against them. That should have ended it, but it didn't. There is a stage in collective guilt where people cease trying to escape and begin acting out the fantasy of escape instead. That was the stage they entered. They were already caught, but not yet physically stopped in full, so they became louder, stranger, more theatrical, messaging people like 3 a.m, accusing them of hacking fire alarms and weird nonsensical bullshit that people shouldn't be messaging people at 3 a.m. that, aren't obsessed. Some wanted to frighten the couple. Some wanted to muddy the narrative. Some believed a few more days would let them fix what months of exposure had broken. They still imagined the story was movable. But stories stop moving once enough people with badges and patience have seen the bones, the infrastructure of the shape. The man sensed it before he knew it. Something in the pressure had changed. The harassment still came, but with the quality of aftershock rather than wave. The group was no longer hunting with discipline. It was flinching in public. Even their attempts at control had become involuntary. They were not setting the field anymore. They were leaving prints. Imprints. The woman sensed it too, though, but differently. Her old world, neighbors, routines, public spaces, chance encounters had started to feel populated by witness rather than leverage. She no longer saw random intrusions as random. She began to understand that every vague message, every forced interaction, every brittle half-threat from a stranger was not evidence of the group's power, but its unraveling. Some nights, members of the group stopped talking altogether in the chat. They reappeared hours later with too much certainty, too many plans, too much forced calm. It was the rhythm of people listening for footsteps. They began suspecting one another, asking who had talked, asking who had cracked, asking who had been careless. The guy knew. It was like he could read their minds and tap into the hive mind or something and knew exactly what they were doing, when they were doing it, knew who they were doing it with. That would be crazy. Imagine fucking with somebody who might be telepathic and can, literally read your intention in your aura. That would be stupid. That word appeared often, though, in the final weeks. Careless. As if the problem had been clumsiness rather than criminality. As if better technique might have made predation innocent. It couldn't. By the time the reports were finalized, the authorities no longer needed a group to do anything. They didn't even do a damn thing but be themselves. Idiots. They only needed them to continue being themselves long enough for the pattern to close. Because patterns are prosecutable. Intent and motive is traced in patterns. Pattern behavior, pattern analysis, pattern recognition, these are all things that are intent, motive, and prosecutable because it shows conscious intent and awareness of thy move and action. There's no delay in the impulse. Impulsivity would be a mental illness which one can claim insanity for, but because of the delay in action compared to thought, it shows conscious awareness. You had time to think, which closes that ring. And it did. One morning, the chat went quiet all at once. No dramatic goodbye, no final instruction, just a sudden stillness that follows the arrival of consequence in physical form. Doors opened, phones were taken, hard drives got mirrored, servers were destroyed, but then recovered. Histories got invoked, the gym footage mattered, the messages mattered, the neighbor contact mattered, the fraud mattered most of all. What had looked to the public like an ugly social dispute was, in truth, it was a system. Harassment as cover, destabilization as maintenance, fraud as an engine, mislabeling as administrative weapon. They had tried to make a couple doubt one another. Instead, they had taught investigators how the whole machine breathed. And that was the final cruelty of it all for the group. Not merely that they were arrested, or exposed, or undone. It was that every last act of escalation after the deadline had expired, and we are way past that date, by the way. No more extensions, I heard. Only made the case against them cleaner. They believed they still had time to do something. What they had, in fact, was only enough time left to reveal themselves completely, or more. Dump it right in. Instead of doing an invocation like I usually do, or a prayer like I did yesterday, we're going to be doing a double ward. And the first one we're going to be doing is the ward of the closed circle. Do you want to take a spatula and stir that in there? Let's focus in while we start this war. By the eye that sees before the snare is set, by the hand that closes what was opened in malice, I seal this field against the watchers in the whispered, against stage concern, poisoned speech, and an appetite to destabilize. Let every false gaze lose its target. Let every manipulative word turn hollow in the mouth that formed it. Let every step taken in deceit be counted, mirrored, and returned to its author. What comes disguised as warning, let it reveal itself as rot. What comes disguised as chance, let it break against this boundary and go no further. I cast a ring not in fear, but of severance. No planted doubt may root here, no borrowed malice may feed here, no circle force may cross without losing its disguise and strength. Let the air reject coercion, let the walls remember truth. Let the floor beneath the hidden enemy grow unsteady with their own design. By the shut gate and the sleepless witness, by the law that turns shadow back upon shadow, I poison the siphon, dry the cord, and bind the hostile current. What was sent to confuse, let it confuse the sender. What was sent to watch, let it feel itself watched. What was sent to tighten, let it close instead around the one who cast it. The circle is not prey. This house is not open. The bond is not yours to touch. So let the boundary harden, so let the hidden be exposed. So let all malice meet resistance, reversal, and return. As sealed, so guarded. As guarded, so untouched. As untouched, so it remains. And this next word we're doing, collectively, we are pulling energy here and returning all that does not belong to us. This is the ancient word of the four seals. By the first breath before the naming of names, by the deep that stood before the road was divided, by the pillars at the edge of the seen and the unseen, I raise this boundary and call it sealed. Let the east be shut with truth, let the south be shut with fire, let the west be shut with the deep waters of remembrance, let the north be shut with stone, iron, and the patience of old law. I see no throne here for malice. I spread no table here for deception. I leave no gate unbarred for the whispering enemy, for the false witness, for the circling eye, for the hand that comes smiling with division hidden in its sleeve. Let every word sent in corruption lose its tongue. Let every gaze sent in the envy lose its road. Let every scheme break upon the threshold as a wave breaks upon the black rock of night. By the elder covenant of dust and flame, what is painted here in peace shall not be uprooted by hidden hatred. What is joined here in truth shall not be loosened by poisoned breath. What is watched by the Most High God shall not be taken by the lesser cunning. I call the ancient keeping powers, the watcher of the gates, the keeper of the measure, the silent witness of breath beneath the earth, the flame above the lintel, the hand that returns each thing to its source. Let the hostile cord be cut. Let the draining vessel be empty of power. Let the hidden snare close only upon the one who hath knotted it. Let no siphon drink here. Let no shadow feed here. Let no counterfeit concern pass inward cloaked as care. If malice comes by foot, let it stumble. If malice comes by word, let it wither. If malice comes by thought, let it find no resting place. If malice comes by hidden work, let it be unmade before it even ripens. This ground is counted, this house is marked, this bond is witnessed, this circle is not abandoned. By the old names written in fire and river, by the hidden law that does not sleep, by the breath of resurrection over what was pressed down, I seal this word. What is sent in darkness shall not enter. What is cast in malice shall not root. What is turned against this circle shall return to its own dust. So let the threshold hold, so let the enemy be turned, so let the seal remain unbroken. As the whispered Emperor of the 99-808, imbued with the divine authority of the Holy Spirit, the decrees of these words shall now overrule law that underlies physical law and send ripples through the third realm like a tsunami through a city and return to sender, all of which was sent in any form of malice, and liberate those subjected to which they were wrongfully subjected to. And so it is. Hopefully we're out here making good choices, guys. I'll see you in the next one.